We also have Sierra Claire joining us on this live conversation. Sierra, thank you for joining us. My question to you is that with artificial intelligence now taking over by storm, in fact, Marco Rubio also mentioned something about AI. What was that he exactly said?
Not AI, actually, Nayan. Marco Rubio has, in an interview to Fox, while on way to Beijing on Air Force One, Sierra, spoke about how the Americans would want China to prevail upon Iran to taper off this war. So is it that the Americans are so stuck that they're seeking Chinese help now with Iran for a ramp-off?
No, I think, what Marco Rubio was talking about is he was asked, what is President Trump going to bring up with President Xi? And this is one of the issues, that President Trump wants to discuss, which is that China comes out and they say they want to be a stabilizing force for the world. And they say that they want to, contribute to working towards peace. And yet they're arming Iran, they're providing intelligence to Iran. And so, President Trump wants to bring that up with Xi and say, can you put pressure on Iran to open the strait, because these Iranian people, they need all of the pressure that we can get. The United States is able to conduct operations at will in and around Iran, but in order for us to leave, which everybody wants, including China, the Iranians need to agree to something, and so that's where China can come in and they can be of help.
And maybe that was an oblique way, given the fact that he's the top diplomat of the United States, that was an oblique way of sort of bringing in the fact that Chinese have been engaging with the Iranians and providing, military direct, indirect support. But what was this Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro's suit, that tracksuit that Marco was wearing? I mean, was there some signaling there?
Yeah, that was very interesting. I think that was just Secretary Rubio giving a nod to American power and what America has been able to accomplish so far, which is removing a dictator that was causing all kinds of problems all over the world and not utilizing energy resources efficiently. And so, Venezuela is now on track. They're producing oil. American companies are investing over there, and I think that Marco Rubio is very proud of that.
Yeah, connecting Venezuela with China, the fact that before capture of Maduro, Venezuela was the key supplier of oil to China, and the fact that the United States captured Maduro in that tracksuit. The fact that Marco Rubio himself is a sanctioned Secretary of State insofar as China is concerned, and they had to tweak his name, in fact, to let him in. I think Rubio was making a statement, see, I'm coming in tracksuits of Maduro, and here I am, deal with it.
Well, Secretary Rubio and President Trump are both very confident representatives of the United States, which has been proven again and again that their confidence is backed up by massive U.S. military and economic power. But I really don't know if this was a signal, specifically related to China.
I think in diplomacy, everything you do, every move, every, raising of your head, etc., everything has signaling there. I think Marco Rubio was sort of sending a signal there. Andrew, coming back to you, you mentioned about a lot of domestic issues, but there is one issue on which even the Americans have come with an ask, which is the release of Jimmy Lai, the media tycoon in Hong Kong. Einar, sorry. The question is to Einar.
Yeah, I mean, they say they're going to do that. I don't know that that was actually raised as part of the protocol. It's a very minor issue.
Trump has said in his engagement with the media that he would raise the issue.
That's fine. He can raise the issue. No one can prevent him from speaking the way that it happens in China when somebody asks something awkward, is to say, that's interesting, we'll look at it, and then they move on to the next subject. Asking for something doesn't mean that you get it. This kind of things. But I want to go back to my fellow commentators' things. She talked about Venezuela not utilizing their energy resources efficiently as a reason for invading them and taking the president, in addition to the accusations of being a drug dealer. I find that interesting that the U.S. is now in a position where it can determine whether it believes countries are utilizing their resources. She did not mention the needs of the people. She just talked about the economic side. And increasingly, this is something where the global South is paying attention, looking at this and saying, wait a second, are we next? Are we going to be judged by the United States? And then that becomes a way in which they can justify coming in and either taking our leaders or destabilizing our governments. Extremely dangerous stuff.
Right, Naro, you're a political and economic expert, and I just want to understand, Trump wants to kind of invest in these open markets, wants China to invest in the open markets of America. And, he talks about these conversations are also going to revolve around global economy. What is your take on that?
Well, they're trying to put in some stopgap measures. As I said, the long term is not very good. I mean, the U.S. sees China as a rival, a very, very big threat to its hegemony. But in the medium time, as we discussed, there are a lot of political realities. Two things that are being proposed by the U.S., which might get some traction, is the idea of a board of trade, which can sort through all of these tariffs and determine what is important and what is not important. It would be staffed by members from both China and the U.S. It would apply just to their trade, but that might be a way of easing some of the tensions. More importantly, it sets up a process by which they're working together, which is not really happening right now. They're also applying the same idea to a board of investment. This would allow investments from both sides to be made as long as they were not contentious or sensitive. So there is some hope here that you could get some sort of process, but otherwise this is going to be very much about, you give me something, I'll give you something. For instance, Boeing. Boeing has airplanes they need to sell, and China needs avionics packages that they generally buy from the US or they can buy from Europe. But it seems like this would be, as I said, something where you give me something, I get something. And I think this is going to be the tenor of this particular negotiation, meeting, whatever you want to call it.
Leverage, Anna, really. What's the leverage with the Americans? Remember, President Trump said, I want China to open up, and if these wonderful people accompanying me are allowed to come in, they can do wonderful things, as Trump says, in China. But the fact of the matter is that the Americans have been at it, wanting or trying to open up China for 2 decades and more, and it remains same. So, I mean, what's the leverage in the present? You think tariffs is that leverage with which Trump has gone to Beijing, and perhaps he can negotiate or use that as a negotiation tool for China to open up?
My dear fellow, you must come to China sometime and look around. Coca-Cola brands, everything that goes into the bathroom is made by U.S. companies.
Not Google, not Google. Not X.
Google doesn't get in, but neither does the U.S. allow chips to come in, and they put pressure on ASML, a Dutch company, not to sell China the chip-making facilities, machinery. So this idea that it's all one-sided and that China has been unfair to the U.S., China acted in its own self-interest, as India does. It does not allow every single American company to come in there and dominate the local markets. These are countries that began very much as developing countries. Now China has arrived. India is very important, but they're not going to give up their sovereignty and roll over. The idea that I bring my business people and that you should be thankful, those days are gone. What we have here are two large, powerful entities.
Don't you think China wants stability at the end of the day? When tariffs are put on any country for that matter, at the end of the day, any country will always look at stability to begin with. And China will, of course, look at for its own stability.
Well, you can say that, but the really who is paying these tariffs? It's not China. It's already been shown that it's over 90% is going directly to the American people. So this idea that I'm going to punish myself to get at you is nonsense. The U.S. still imports over $4 trillion worth of goods. Where they import it from is not important. That's why originally Donald Trump said he was going to refocus America and reindustrialize it. But how do you reindustrialize a country where wages are higher, energy is higher, and you just don't have the capital to do it? So he's in a conundrum. His basic premise that he could reindustrialize the United States has failed. His tariffs have hurt the American people. So he is, he's moment by moment. He's trying to figure out what his next stance is going to be and how he can keep the American people distracted until they finally figure out that they're paying more for gas and
Let me
groceries.
take this to Sierra. Ena, that's provocative. You're saying that this visit is about distracting the Americans from what's happening in the domestic politics. Are you suggesting that?
Donald Trump said it himself. He said no one in America is listening or watching anything else. That's his words.
Yeah, I think he was just flattering Xi Jinping. I think he was just I think he was just giving importance to his own visit and flattering Xi Jinping that, oh, see, this visit is so important that everyone is looking to it, and let's have some deliverables on the table so that I can go back home and you can, of course, Xi Jinping need not go anywhere and speak to anyone, but that's how it is. Okay, Sierra, so you think President Trump is under a little more pressure than Xi Jinping insofar as deliverables are concerned?
Well, I want to go back to something, the panel, my colleague on the panel here said America is the aggressor. In this relationship with China and the United States, China is the aggressor. America is not going into China and trying to turn it capitalist. That is what China is doing in America. There have been multiple arrests of espionage and other groups, foreign-funded, foreign-linked groups, protest groups, all kinds of foreign influence that link back to China, and they are trying to fundamentally change America. America just wants to manage the relationship with China. And when it comes to the economics, I think President Trump is in a very strong position. America is producing the most oil that it's produced, or the most energy that it's produced since World War II. So we are the world's global energy supplier, and I think that gives President Trump a lot of leverage. In addition to all of the trade deals and rebalancing that he's already secured, with our other trading partners, and so now the one that's left to deal with is China. And we have options now that we're coming to China because we're not in trade deficits with every single one of our trading partners. So we do have alternatives, and we can say to China, hey, if you're not going to play fair, and if you're going to keep stealing IP property, and you're going to, implement unfair tariffs on American companies, we have other options now that we're not in trade deficits with, and that gives President Trump a lot of leverage. And that's not to say that he doesn't want to make a deal, and Americans don't want to do business with China. We do. We import a lot from China. That's going to continue. Everybody knows that. But President Trump is in a much stronger position now, I think, than in the past time that he met.
U.S. wants China to, increase investments in job creation. He wants, China to kind of buy more of agricultural products. Is this not kind of a juxtaposition to what you're just saying? Of course, you might be right when you say they are the biggest energy suppliers, but what about the other aspects?
Well, President Trump has talked about the soybean farmers and these different deals that China has already committed to, and now he's just trying to reiterate that they need to follow through on the purchasing orders and future purchases that they committed to. And certainly, with our agricultural industry, we do export to China. But I think, again, there's a lot of room for the U.S. to grow and to find other trading partners as well. So I don't know that President Trump is, desperate. I think he is committed to ensuring that China follows through on the deals that they've already committed to.
Sarah, I know. Interesting that Einar let it pass. Einar, did you hear Sarah say that she accused Chinese of espionage and whatnot? In fact, just 2 days before President Trump's visit started, the Department of Justice has charged a mayor in California, Arcadia, I believe, mayor of Arcadia, Ellen Wong, of acting as an agent of the Chinese People's Republic of China. And she has, in fact, pleaded guilty to the charges. So this keeps, occurring off and on about citizens of America of Chinese origin essentially working as spies for the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes, and Indians in China obviously must be illegal aliens. Come on, be serious here. You're shocked.
This is Department of Justice. This is Department of Justice charge,
which has been pleaded
going on. Which has been, she has pleaded guilty to it. She has pleaded guilty to the felony count. It's not. I'm not making it up, Einar.
No, I'm not saying you're making it up. I'm saying that it is actuality. It's kind of like the U.S. taking out ads on the internet asking for spies and assets from China. All right, I don't know what your point is. The fact is, espionage goes on. All countries are engaged in it. You saw Israel has assets within the U.S. government. They get caught, convicted, sent to jail, and then they're sent back to Israel and take prominent positions in the Knesset, in their parliament. So this idea that somehow this is a gotcha moment, not at all. She pled guilty. I don't know what she did. No one tells me. But if there's spying going on, I'm not surprised. And I'm surprised you are.
No, it's not about surprise. It's just that it's a fact. And I thought the conversation I was guiding this, the direction in which I was guiding this conversation to Einar was, because earlier I asked about Jimmy Lai. You think there could be some kind of quid pro quo? These are small things, and but big on optics, that if China agrees to release Jimmy Lai and the Americans let Ellen Wong go, then maybe, there can be a give and take, is the question I had in my mind.
Yeah, that's in your mind, but you're going back to the Cold War. When has China and the U.S. done a swap? The only thing that comes close to that is when Canada grabbed the daughter of Huawei founder, and they held her on very questionable grounds. And then China grabbed two Canadians, one who was an asset, who was close to the leader of North Korea. In fact, he had access and pictures of them together on boats, and his handler, the two Michaels. In fact, the asset sued the Canadian government and won a substantial amount of money, estimated at around $25 million, because he said, I didn't know I was being used. And it basically cost me a couple of years of my life. So, this idea that spying is going on and, these are facts. Yes, they are facts. But China is not Russia. It's not the United States. People have to get this out of their mind. China approaches things from their perspective, agree or don't agree. They think that things have to be done through consensus, that you have to sit down at a table rather than throwing tanks at each other.
Right.
This is, you can agree or not, but I think it's a better way in my personal.
Thank you for giving us all of those interesting insights into what it's going to be like. And in fact, we will request you to stay on a call with us. We will be right back after a short break. Don't go anywhere, because once you come back, there's a lot more lined up. Well, those were some interesting visuals, but we still have Einar and Sierra with us joining from the United States. Sierra, this brings me to my question to you. Now, we understand that China is one of the biggest oil and gas importers from Tehran. And with this existing West Asia war crisis, how are we looking at Donald Trump, wanting China or asking for China for help to kind of intervene in this situation?
Well, I think President Trump welcomes China's help, and I think that China also realizes that it's in their best interest to put pressure on Iran. You know, China operates the proxy.
How is that in China's best interest?
Well, China operates these proxy relationships, and this Iran one, and Russia similarly, they're both in Iran. But, this Iran one, I think it really got away from them. And I think that they realize that, when they're putting pressure on Iran, and Iran is still spreading the war all around the Middle East and, causing more chaos that's actually ending up harming China, that they're realizing that they need to get it, at least in this particular instance, get over to President Trump and work with him. And they're both going to quell this chaotic and totally out of control Iranian regime. And I think that that will benefit China.
Ramp up, but let me take this to Einar. Einar, how can the Chinese help the Americans with Iran?
They're not trying to help the Americans. What was missing from my colleague's statement was the fact that this whole situation was started by the U.S. with this inane idea that they were going to bomb and take out the top leadership, and that somehow Iran would magically transform into an ally of the United States. This was never going to happen. It shows a deep lack of knowledge about Iran, 17th largest country in the world, both by population and size. It is a civilization. It is not a toy. It's not like Venezuela, where you can go in and you have a regime that had pluses and minuses. They can say that there was, there were revolts, but you also, riots, but you also had America. And you think that China controls them?
No, it's not about control. So in fact, it was interesting, Einar, that Marco Rubio, when he spoke to Fox, he made a very interesting observation, or an interesting observation, which was that even the Chinese ships are getting hit. So even if not deliberate, the Iranians would not have intended to hit a Chinese ship, but just 2 days back it happened. So it's not that, and the fact that the fact of the matter is China gains most if this thing stops. So whatever can be done should be done. Not just for China, but for everyone, involved. If the Americans are so pleading, I think it gives Chinese the leverage.
Well, let's be clear. Remember what I said? You have 30 different military entities cut off from each other who are waging war. Whether they know or don't know which ship is which, I don't know. Whether it was deliberate or accidental, I don't know. So this idea that because one ship from China, a cargo ship, was hit, therefore China has to wade in and do exactly what the US would do and play cowboy is nonsensical. India's had its share of harm from this. Is India sending ships in there to free the Straits of Hormuz? No, no one is. That's the fact. Donald Trump has run out of options, and he's now come to China because he thinks that they have leverage.
But that's still not a normal situation. That's not a normal situation. Ambassador Deepak Vora joins us for the India view. Since you got an India ANR, let me get in the India view also. Ambassador Vora, welcome. Good morning to this broadcast, and good morning and welcome to this broadcast. And what's the New Delhi view today as Trump and Xi Jinping meet at the Great Hall of People?
Well, thank you very much. You might recall that they had met in South Korea, was it, in October 2025? And I recall the opening comments. Oh, I love you, my darling, my sweetheart. 10 minutes later, you son of a gun, you this, you that. It comes to that. So when I was studying at the Sorbonne, we read with great interest a chap called Jean-Baptiste Lacar, who said something very nice, very interesting. Plus ça change, plus c'est le même. The more it changes, the more it is the same. I do not expect anything from this. The experts will talk of 3 Ts and 5 Xs and 6 Qs, etc. They invent all these lovely terms. Reality is, America is number one, intends to be. China wants to be number one, displace America. Till that conflict is resolved, I don't see anything happening. Now, people are saying, will he throw Taiwan under the bus? Will China throw Iran under the bus? No, China is not what is enabling Iran to fight. Iran is fighting on its own, doing whatever it can. China is certainly helping. Then there's the other conflict going on in Ukraine. So I call this, if you permit, in the United States, an insanely popular dance called the triangle dance. I call it the triangle. And in this triangle, as far as President Trump is concerned, it's at the moment, it's China, Taiwan, and the United States. Taiwan is a pretend game. China pretends that Taiwan belongs to it. America pretends that Taiwan, it believes in the one China policy, but it continues to arm them, continues to do all kinds of funny things over there. Its leaders, Nancy Pelosi, had gone there some time ago. So everybody's pretending. And Taiwan issues its own currency, has its own military, elects its own president. It's all a pretend game. Nobody is going to call out the pretense and say, guys, let's get real. My feeling, net result of this meeting, lovely words, game changer, etc. You heard all this. By tomorrow morning, we would have forgotten what they discussed. It will remain the same.
Right, that was very interesting. In fact, Sierra, this brings me to my, after listening to his comments, would
Trump throw Taiwan under the bus?
This is the under the bus philosophy. Will China throw Iran under the bus? Is America able to throw Taiwan under the bus?
Let me take the Taiwan question to Sierra. Sierra, would Trump throw Taiwan under the bus?
Well, President Trump, President Trump we have our American military who is long-term engaged in this Taiwan issue. These are people with decades and decades of military experience, and so I think it would be very unlikely that President Trump would go against the sort of Washington standard, which is that keeping Taiwan independent is in the U.S. national interest as well as the world's. And so I think it would be very unlikely for him to go against that. That being said, President Trump is, willing to work with China when they show that they're willing to work with us. So, if China actually proved to be a stable partner and they followed through on their agreements and they stopped all of their shady activities, President Trump might be willing to offer them something, not all of Taiwan or not, changing things drastically, but he might be willing to offer them something. But that I find that to be unlikely because I don't think China's going to open that road for themselves.
For those interesting thoughts, thank you, Sierra, thank you, Einar, and thank you, Mr. Vora, for joining us. We will be right back after a short break. Don't go anywhere because there's a lot lined up.